And former RAF pilot Michael Kay. He is now joining us live from Paris. Michael, thanks so much for joining us. This is, of course, an unfortunate incident. As we know, a chopper has crashed with some senior officials, including the Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat, on board. We are, of course, updating this story, getting more details as we can. What can you tell us about this crash, especially the chopper involved?
Well, I mean, it's tragic because it's got the Chief of the Defence Staff on board, and obviously, you know, the rest of the crew. The Chief of the Defence Staff being the #1 military man across all of the forces in the Indian Air Forces. So his health and his safety is unknown at the moment, as is the rest of the crew. Although there are fatalities that are known, but to be determined. The helicopter was an Mi-17. It's almost like the AK-47 of the helicopter world. It's Russian made. It's been around forever. The Brits have been using it with the Afghans in Afghanistan. The Indians have been using the Mi-17 helicopter for decades. You know, the Indian Air Force helicopter pilots are some of the most revered in the world, just because of the areas that they operate in. And I'm talking more to the north of India, in Kashmir. There are some of the most highest helicopter landing sites up in the Himalayas that the Indian Air Force helicopter pilots operate to, and I'm in no doubt that the crew of this particular VIP flight will have had extensive experience, and there will have been lots of checks prior to the flight. It's impossible to say what caused the accident without sort of understanding what the preliminary report says. But the report, or the preliminary investigation, will be looking into all sorts of things. It'll be looking into human factors. It'll be looking into the crew's background. It'll be looking into the crew's sleep patterns, how long the crew have been working over the past 30 days, 3 days. The books from the engineering side, they will be seized. They will be investigated, looking at when the helicopter was last serviced. It will be looking at all sorts of patterns of if there are any issues that the helicopter had, and what the lifespan of the helicopter was like, if you like. It will be looking at the number of hours flown on the helicopter in the last 3 to 6 months. And then they'll be looking for eyewitness reports. If you look at where the area is, Sulu Air Force Base, it's just to the east of Coimbatore, and it's right in the valley. The destination was the Defence Services Staff College, which, if you look at the map, is up by the Dodi Betta mountain, which is at 8,600 feet. So there is an enormous climb going from almost ground level at Sulu Air Force Base all the way up to the destination, which was the Staff College. But that said, that will have been a route that will have been taken quite frequently. I'm in no doubt that, it's a 25-minute flight. It's 50 miles north of the
Michael,
of the
just
base.
to interrupt you there, I wanted to expand on that particular point right now that you mentioned. We just spoke to an aviation expert on this broadcast, and he mentioned the difficulties that terrain and weather are posing in the rescue operations that are currently underway. You're also talking about similar factors as of now. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things I'd be looking at is the weather. What is the cloud base going up into that mountainous region? What are the wind speeds? When you get into the mountains, there are all sorts of localized winds that can affect the helicopter, from updrafts and downdrafts. When you get that high as well, there's power considerations. But as I said, this probably will have been a well-flown route, but that can have its disadvantages as well in terms of familiarity. In the case of many crashes, it can come down to not just the difficulty of the route, but if the weather comes into high terrain, familiarity with a certain route can actually be a disadvantageous thing, and it can breed a little bit of familiarity and a little bit of contempt. We don't know that. But the way that the weather sits on high ground as well, the visibility can come in very, very quickly. And when you're going into weather like that, you have to have a turnaround plan, which is basically you have to be tracking what's going on right behind you. You have to put yourself on one side of a valley. If you see the weather coming in and the visibility coming in and the precipitation starting to occur, you either put yourself on one side or the other. Usually you put yourself, if you're flying from the right-hand seat, you put yourself on the left-hand side of the valley. So when you start the turn, if you're the handling pilot, you've got a really good view of what you're turning into as you come away from the high ground. I'll be interested to know what CDS was going to the Staff College for. If it was for a presentation or if it was for a high-profile meeting, there might have been an impetus to actually get there rather than go, turn around, land on, and go by car. There's all sorts of factors that need to be assessed in terms of why this accident happened. It's tragic because it's got the chief of the defence staff on board, and obviously the rest of the crew. The chief of the defence staff being the number one military man across all of the forces in the Indian Air Forces. So his health and his safety is unknown at the moment, as is the rest of the crew. Although there are fatalities that are known, but to be determined. The helicopter was an Mi-17. It's almost like the AK-47 of the helicopter world. It's Russian made. It's been around forever. The Brits have been using it with the Afghans in Afghanistan. The Indians have been using the Mi-17 helicopter for decades. The Indian Air Force helicopter pilots are some of the most revered in the world, just because of the areas that they operate in. I'm talking more to the north of India,